Welcome to this short series of Autumn EdTech Vodcasts. My name is Gemma Gwillam and I'm an educational technologist within the United Learning Technology team. This autumn series is designed to provide a little more guidance and advice around the various sections of our digital strategy toolkit for schools. This is a collection of resources that we've made available to United Learning schools on United Hub, our eternal SharePoint site, as well as externally via the DfE's EdTech Demonstrator resource website. There's a variety of things in the toolkit itself, but ultimately it's a self-service toolkit, which after schools walk through, it will support them to plan and write their own practical digital strategy. For this first episode, I'm happy to introduce Bruce Wilson. So Bruce, before we get started on this first episode, shall we start with some introductions? What's your role in United Learning and your background in EdTech?
Yeah, morning, Gemma. Thanks for that introduction. It's nice to be here. So, yeah, my name's Bruce Wilson. I'm on the same team as Gemma. My role is one of educational technologists. I largely work with secondary schools and all through schools within the group. Because of the work we're doing with the Demonstrator Schools program, I'm also currently co-leading the technology department at United Learning, and specifically I look after the sort of non-technical bits, so the educational technology bits, if you will, and what that really boils down to is supporting and helping our schools within the group, within the United Learning group, and beyond the group as part of the Demonstrated Schools program, really with their digital strategy. That's what it boils down to. And I've got a really good team around me in technology and beyond technology, to help schools do this well and to make it affordable, which is important as well. Yeah. So I'm getting on a bit now. I think I've been doing this for, I don't know, 25 years or so. I started as just a bog standard teacher like everybody else, and got interested in using technology in classrooms. This was long before the days of interactive whiteboards, and that interest just sort of grew and grew and grew. I left schools for a while, had about 8 or 9 years in industry. That was with at the time, one of the country's sort of biggest suppliers of EdTech. So, got to work with lots of schools, got to explore lots of things they were trying, worked on some new school bids, putting technology into schools with a fresh white bit of paper. So that was interesting. And then returned to schools as a middle and then a senior leader, leading on EdTech. And I've been with United Learning, I think, coming up 8 years now. So sort of taking all that experience and trying to help and support leaders, beyond the group. And it's been really good, actually, to extend our work as part of the DfE's pandemic response, outside the group. Yeah, so I'll be quiet now. That's enough about me.
Brilliant, thanks, Bruce. I think it's really interesting and it's useful for everyone to know that we're not just presenting tech, we have been in the classroom as well. So it's great to draw upon those expertise.
Well, it was a long time ago for me. I know less so for you, but yes, I think I agree. That's an important point.
So first things first, where can United Learning schools and schools engaged with the EdTech Demonstrator School programme find the digital strategy toolkit?
Okay, let me just share my screen. If you can let me know, Gemma, when you're seeing this, it should pop up in a second.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks.
Can you
Bruce.
see that now? Perfect. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll answer that in a couple of ways. So so as Gemma said in the introduction, this is a toolkit. It's essentially a collection of resources, and we'll explore them in a bit more detail in this vodcast series. That's the whole point. But it at its heart, it's a collection of resources designed to be largely self-service, although there's lots of people out there to help, whereby schools can work their way through it and use all of the resources. And the output will be, right at the end, will be a tangible, written, operational digital strategy. Literally a bit of paper with a written plan that you can use to deploy it, and I think more importantly, other stakeholders, governors, for example, can hold you to account on. So that's what it is. Within the United Learning Group, we've got United Hub. Our colleagues will be really familiar with that, and if you go to United Hub, and if you just literally use the search function right on the home page, that's the best way to find it. Actually, type in digital strategy or digital strategy toolkit, and it will take you to this page here. So that's the best way for United Learning Schools. If you're not United Learning School, if you're part of the DfE's Demonstrator Schools program, whether you're working with us or one of the many other demonstrators, we've also made this publicly available. So their website is edtechdemo.ucst.uk. And then if you follow the link to the resources, again, we've called it Digital Strategy Toolkit. It's one of the newest ones that's been posted up here, actually. So if you click on newest first and use that filter, right now it's at the top. That might change over time, but right now that's at the top. And if you click on that link, you'll come to this online document. And this is a sort of fancy contents page, really. We just wanted to give the same kind of structure as we've got on our internal site to people beyond the group, because they can't see that really. So this is a contents page, and it links through to all of the same documents that are in the toolkit. You've got exactly the same content. And what I've also done here is just give a little explanation of what each resource is and the desired output. So the first one, for example, is a blog that my boss wrote, our chief operating officer. So there's a nice bit of text there for leaders, just to sort of set this all in context. Why is this important? Why should they be doing it? Yeah. So yeah, in summary, a couple of places to find it. Use United Hub, search for digital strategy if you're a UL school. If you're not and you're outside of the group and are engaged with the DfE's EdTech program, go to their website, go to the resources section and follow the links. So, but it is, just to stress, this is all the same stuff. We were really keen on, as part of our external work, at sharing everything we've done. So yeah, hopefully that's helpful.
Brilliant, thanks Bruce. So what was the background for Toolkit and what is it trying to achieve?
Okay, so that's a really good question. That's kind of really important. So let me just, I'll show this on United Hub, but what I'm about to say applies to wherever you pick up the resources. It doesn't kind of really matter. So if I just scroll down on the web page, we won't have time to explain everything that's on this page here, but if I scroll down to the toolkit itself, let me just open up the first section, for example. So you can see there's a collection of stuff in there. Now, we are quite a big organisation. I think close on 90 odd schools now. So it would be impossible for us to have, one digital strategy, because our schools are just so different, geographically, size, phase, independent and academies. We just have such variety across our group. So it would be impossible to have one singular digital strategy. I think it would be impossible to have, one classroom solution or one EdTech kit for teachers. That we've just got so much variety, and the same could be true across the country as well. I just don't believe in singular strategies or singular solutions, and in fact, in many cases in EdTech, that's proved not to work. You could look at perhaps the way the Los Angeles school district gave every teacher an iPad and thought that would, change the way education worked across thousands of schools. It's proven over time not to work. So I'm going to answer this question in a sort of slightly politician's way. What this isn't is one solution or one strategy. What it is, and this is the background behind it, is a collection of resources so that schools can write and create their own vision and their own strategy, importantly in their own context. Okay, and those two things are kind of different. So what you're not going to find in this toolkit is we think this is great, we think this is the best, do this. That's not what it is, and we don't believe in that approach anyway. But what you will find in it is a series of things to do, and some of those are very practical, like get someone in charge of this locally, get a leader, and that leader should be on senior management and understand teaching and learning. That's a practical step, and form a group of people around them. But some of them are more things to sort of think about and discuss. So for example, there's a range of resources describing the pros and cons of various types of educational kit that might go into a classroom. So it's that kind of thing. Ultimately, the design philosophy of this is that schools think about the right things, make the right informed decisions, and come up with their own strategy. That was ultimately the background.
Brilliant, thank you, Bruce. That's really useful. Can you scroll back up to the top for me, please? Because I saw some rocks, and you've got something about big rocks. So what's
rocks
that section all about? Yeah.
So again, good question. So, and I think this is something to reinforce. I think both the schools in the group and kind of beyond the group. Let me just try to. That's a bit small there. Let me see if I can make it a bit bigger. Hopefully that's a bit bigger on your screen now.
Oh yeah. That's great.
So yeah, good question. We what I just said around schools considering this in their own context is true to the philosophy. It's really what we kind of believe in, and that would be true whether you're a United Learning School or not. Ultimately, a digital strategy can mean many things. However, we reflected on our time before, during, and after the pandemic, and said, right, we are where we are. We want to, sorry, horrible government expression, but we want to level up. We want all our schools to be in the position of the best schools. We don't want any teacher or learner to be left behind again. Not for another pandemic. I'm talking about normal life. We don't want any child, whatever school they're in, whatever phase or whatever type of school they're in, to be disadvantaged. In terms of the big rocks, these were just, although schools are going to make local decisions and are going to consider their own context, these were just some things that we just felt were almost non-negotiables. These are the most important things. These were the things that we thought, whatever schools do in their local context, we shouldn't miss these things. We shouldn't let this opportunity ride without dealing with these sort of most important issues. Now, you're very free to agree or disagree with them. That's not really the point. I think the point, particularly for an external school, when you're doing this and when you're starting this exercise, don't get into the weeds sort of straight away. Think about what your big rocks are. Now, for us, they're the things that are on the screen there. We want to give a lot of thoughts to equipping our teachers and our classrooms with the very best ed tech, and that isn't just about shiny new boxes. There's a stage before that, which is we do a lot of work on what great teaching and learning looks like, what a great lesson looks like, and that's well established within our group. And so the thinking we want schools to go through before they buy that shiny new tool is, okay, I want to do a better assessment or better modeling or better questioning. These are great teaching techniques. What's the best ed tech to do that? That's what teaching quality is about. Learning quantity is around essentially what that boils down to is student devices. But I think it would have been really easy, wouldn't it, just to buy more Chromebooks or make just to fill the gaps that the pandemic has left. We haven't got that many left, really, and that would have been quite an easy exercise to do, technically and financially. But it's not really the point, is it? Yes, okay, students have got devices, but as we come out of this pandemic, what are they actually doing with them meaningfully as work at home or homework, if you will, that's going to help their learning tomorrow or consolidate their learning from today? So it's that thinking about how does this fit with the learning process that's most important. And then we've got a third strand there around software, which really builds on some work that we've already started. We use, for example, Hegarty Maths right across the group, but and it's been really successful actually. But we want to consolidate that work, take a much more strategic approach, horizon scan for other bits of software like that outside of maths that are really good. They contain really good content, give personalized analytical results that students can use and teachers can use, and so they can be more accountable for their own learning. So yeah, in summary, lots of flexibility within the toolkit, but these were some things that we just felt we shouldn't miss. You're very welcome to borrow those, but the most important thing is, I think, for schools is, before you start on this journey, give some thinking to what your big rocks are. They might be very different from us. You might be in a special school addressing very detailed SEND needs. You might be in a school which is dedicated to the creative arts and want a bit more of a creative inquiry-based approach. I don't know. Your context is going to be very, very different. But I think it's really important to sort of zoom out. What are our most important things? And that's quite a good starting point.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you, Bruce. That's really useful. Now, today's podcast is all about leadership and governance. So what are the key documents that people will find within this first section of the Digital Strategy Toolkit?
Okay, great. So let's get into the toolkit in a bit more detail. So as Gemma says, we're going to do a series of these. We want them to be quite consumable, sort of half an hour-ish or 45 minutes, and it'd be impossible to show you everything in that. So the plan is basically to go through this kind of section by section. So you can see, and this will be true whether you're picking it up in the hub or outside. You can see there's 5 sections. The leadership and governance piece, a section on auditing, a section on classroom and device refresh, a section on financial planning, and then there's a final section around, basically how to write this down. So today we're going to focus on the first one, essentially. So let's just kind of open it up, just so you've got a sense of how this is kind of structured. So if you were on the EdTech site, you'd be clicking on all of these links with section A. I'm just going to show it in the hub today, but it's the same section. It's exactly the same stuff. So firstly, on the kind of structure, we've put an overview on all of these sections. Actually, we've put an overview at the start, and that will always kind of just sort of almost set the scene really, and give you an idea about what's in the rest of the structure. So, for example, there's that blog I already kind of mentioned, and if I open up this document 1.3, for example, you can see that there's a nice sort of infographic there for leaders, just to kind of summarize the process that we're going through here. So and that's a sort of never-ending process that will never be finished. One of the things we see with the best schools is they don't just go through this in year one because someone at Matt is telling them to do it. They're constantly reviewing this. It's an annular cycle of visioning, planning, or reviewing that, of auditing, seeing where we're at, of refresh, of making sure that that's financially affordable and sustainable, implementation, and just keeping all of that going, really, including supporting staff along the way. So that's quite a nice sort of overview of all of that. Now, moving down, I've talked quite a lot around our kind of big rocks already. If you want a little bit more detail on that, either as a UL school or not really, there's a video in there. I think that's probably about 20 or 30 minutes long, where I think that's me, might be one of the team, can't remember, where we talk about that in a bit more detail. So one of the things I was quite keen on doing with those videos is giving the audience a version of it. So I won't play that video now because you're already bored of me, but what you might want to do is adapt that in your own kind of context. So let me find here. Let me put that up on the screen. So the PowerPoint deck that sits behind that video, where I just basically do a voiceover, we've also made that available, right? So and we've made that available with the audio and without the audio. And now, why have I included that? Well, it really points back to what I said about adaptation in the local context. You know, please use those slide decks. If you want to change the big rocks, change the big rocks. If you want to change the timescales behind that cycle, you know, kind of change that. So what we're trying to do is share the videos that we've produced for our schools, but also make the resources available so they can be adapted. So that's that section. As we go down, this section is sort of quite important, really. So it's quite important. This isn't unique to EdTech. This is, you know, before you're starting any kind of strategic project, you know, it's very important that leaders kind of set the vision. Okay, set the direction of travel. What is it we're trying to achieve? You know, an inspiring piece of content that they can use with other colleagues. So that's what that section is all about, really. There is a United Learning technology vision, which again we've readily shared. I won't go through all of that now. Really, that's designed to, like I said at the start, it's not one vision. That piece of content is designed to inspire and sort of instruct how a vision might be structured, for example. So there's a section on learning, there's a section on teaching, there's a section on management, administration and communication, and sections where all of those kind of things intersect. You know, there's a series of text in there that can be used so that schools can you know, sort of copy the style in many respects, and you know, kind of create their own vision. So that's sort of quite important. What else is there in this section? Okay, yeah, these workshops are sort of quite important. So let me find one here. Again, I won't go through all of this now, but just to flag that it's there, really. So there's a series of kind of workshops in here that schools can just pick up, so that without our help, they can run perhaps a senior management team workshop designed to get the ball rolling with regards to an EdTech vision. Okay, so if I scroll down, some of these bits at the start, some of these bits at the end are, you know, there's some questions that you might ask that are going to stimulate a response and, you know, generate some content for you. There's also some management theory at the start here. Those of you who've done any studying in this kind of field will recognize that model, for example. You know, if you don't have a vision, if that bit's missing at the start of this process, ultimately you can have well-skilled staff, all the incentives in the world, the best EdTech resources and a plan, but, you know, if you don't know where you're going, that's likely to be a confusing journey for people. So that's there. And again, they are editable PowerPoints, and you can adapt those in your own kind of context. What else? This one is really, really key for us, this Word document here. So let me just pull that one up on the screen. That document there. And again, this is editable. This is a Word document, so this isn't you know, the way it absolutely has to be. But we felt it was really important to give some thought to the roles and responsibilities of people working on this. You know, clearly, probably the head teacher and members of SMT are going to be involved, you know, as perhaps sponsors. There should be a digital strategy lead, we believe, and that really, really should be, without being unkind to technical colleagues, this really should be someone that understands and ideally leads on kind of teaching and learning. But there will be other people involved. You know, there'll be technical people, there'll be financial people, there'll be all sorts of people, champions, new teachers, people that are just keen on it. So we just felt it was important to define those roles and responsibilities. So this document does that. You know, we've used the term sponsor, digital strategy lead, and digital strategy project group. We've given some thought about what they would be doing and their key tasks and so on and so forth. and a recommendation of where that would be. But clearly all schools are different. But do use that or generate something like it. It's editable. But like any other project, I think it's important to define who's doing what, and most importantly, who's leading on it really. And then just some more practical advice really at the end here around who needs to do what by when. We were pressed sort of quite hard, for example, on let me find the right slide there. Here we go. On what the sort of minimal expectations would be, for example. So there's some ideas on there. Just to kind of go through those. There's a lot more detail clearly that sits behind this, but like I said in the introduction, we felt it was just really, really important that schools have a plan. This isn't just a pipe dream or the vision in some keen ed tech guru's head. It should be tangible, it should be written, and the plan should have not just ed tech at its heart, it should have teaching and learning at its heart. Like I've already said, that the plan should not miss the big ticket items. I think it's quite, in this field of ed tech, it's quite easy to go down various rabbit holes that don't actually in the end help students learn, and you should avoid that. You should really focus on the big important stuff. And then just that last bit at the end there, that whatever this plan is, that it is, it's not a pipe dream. It's grounded in the reality of schools' budgets. It's affordable and sustainable, and we know what we're spending our money on over 3 to 5 years, rather than the position which lots of schools find themselves in, which is, we've got a couple of tens of thousands of pounds left at the end, or what should we buy? That sort of thing we're aiming to kind of move on. Yeah, so it's quite a big section, this bit. And in many respects, it almost is a bit of a pause or a check for leaders. It's sort of getting the right people in the right places. It's creating that vision so that we all know where we're going. It's really sort of setting out right at the start, what we're trying to achieve and over what timescales. So yeah, that's that.
Oh, thank you, Bruce. That looks like a really clear but very useful section for our schools. Now, thinking about the end product, and I know that it's going to be more Vodcast to come on the rest of the toolkit, but with half an eye on this end product, can you talk a little bit more about the expected output of all of this hard work, please?
Yeah. So yeah, happy to do that. So part of it is that last slide that was up there. Part of it is the minimal expectations. But if I give a little bit more detail on that. So for us, if I close down, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'm going to close down all of that. As Gemma says, there'll be more vodcasts to come on these middle sections, so B, C, and D. But there is this section at the end, which is E, which is quite small, really, which essentially answers Gemma's question. What should we expect? What should we do as the output from all of this? So there's an overview document in there, but probably the most important thing is that you've got an example of what this kind of might look like, really. So this, I will say, let me find the right document. There we go. So this is not rocket science. I think what I'm trying to achieve here is take good practice in terms of strategic planning that leaders will be used to in any project, whether it's school development or, I don't know, improving outcomes in maths, or writing a better PSHE curriculum, or improving what we do with extra, all of that sort of stuff. We'll have a plan somewhere, and EdTech and digital strategy shouldn't be any different, really. But I think if our group is anything to go by, sometimes this is done really, really well. In other schools, less so. So, like I said earlier on, I think this should be tangible. This should be a realistic plan, a written plan, and what this what this template does is give you an example of how to structure that year on year. You know, and like I said, it's not sort of rocket science. So there's some opening text about, you know, who owns this, who's responsible for this, where this plan is reported to, for example, whether that's governors or elsewhere, and then just a really kind of simple structure. Now the examples you can see on the screen with the names redacted are just some examples of a school that one of us worked on in before. So the actual content will change, but essentially you're going to have a column here, which is, you know, what we're trying to do, the top level objective. That might be year one of your first big rock, for example. And then, you know, you do actually take the time to say, you know, who's doing what and when, and, you know, who's going to lead on it, who's going to take responsibility for it, you know, right down to the level of detail of, you know, this person is going to do this by this date. That's the sort of level of detail I think we should be after here, really. So this is taking a vision which is there for the right reasons, but is quite ethereal, and bringing it down to a sort of practical level of, you know, who's doing what when. And then most importantly, you know, the very best schools in this area, like the very best schools in broader school improvement, they don't just do stuff, they take the time to reflect on stuff. You know, is this working? How do we know? And if it's not, let's stop or tweak or change. You know, so like I say, this isn't rocket science in terms of strategy planning, but it is an attempt to bring all of the rest of the toolkit all together in one tangible plan that can be shared around the school, and wherever your reporting mechanisms are, if you're a head reporting into a regional director, or if you're accountable to a committee within a governing body, or if you're a line manager, you know, you can refer back to this, and, you know, it's a structure to hold people to account. And like I say, I think my experience in EdTech is the very best schools do take this approach. In other schools, it's a little bit more year on year, hand to mouth, or just the output of you know, somebody who's really, really keen, but just, you know, their individual ideas, which will only get you so far, I think. You know, that's the sort of the output.
Brilliant, thanks, Bruce. Now, for any of our UL schools that are watching, we've had quite a bit of feedback from them about the timeline of all this. So could you give us a bit more detail, please?
Yeah, so that's kind of a good point. So just to say, for UL schools, when you go onto the toolkit, so this is at the top of the page, sort of above the document stack itself, you've got this useful links section. And one of the things we did at the start was do a webinar launch for leaders. We did that, I think, when was that? End of September, start of October. So we did that for secondary schools, we did that for primary schools, and the videos are linked there. So if you ever need to refer back to how this was originally launched, that was literally the week after we spoke to head teachers about it, you can get that there. Okay. And we were asked that question on both those webinars, actually. I should say that we've not published these externally, by the way, for demonstrator schools, and the main reason for that is there's lots of United Learning references in there, which won't make much sense if you're not within the group. But all of the rest of the toolkit is perfectly transferable. Yeah, so we were asked that question around, you know, what do we need to do by when? And since then, we've had lots of feedback, really, or I have particularly, around, well, you didn't really give that good an answer, and can we have a bit more detail? And essentially, the answer I gave at the time was still holds true, and it points back to what I said about the variety of our schools. You know, so many have different starting points, different contexts, da 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 da. So it's almost impossible to give one time scale. But I did reflect on it, and you know, what I'll show you next is the output of that reflection. So let me just find the right screen as well. Okay, good. So make that a bit bigger. Can you see all those slides now, Gemma?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Let's
see the front. Yeah, I can see the front page. There we go.
Let's just sort of go through these in kind of a bit more detail. So I won't read through all the text, but we can share these slides. So, in summary, what should schools be doing this term? So this is autumn term 2021. Well, really, first half time is all about sort of kicking off the process, really. So as a school, you should really have that group formed. You should have that leader identified, and that digital strategy leader and kind of group in place. Our team are actually busy collecting case study evidence, particularly on the strand around what do classrooms look like, and what devices are kind of out there and how they're being used. So we're busy sort of collecting all that kind of evidence, really. I think the focus of the sort of second half of the term needs to be really engaging with that kind of toolkit, really, and really kind of getting started on that first section. So that could be reaching out to the toolkit. It could be, if you're a URL school, engaging with your United Learning technologist. You should know who that is, and kind of really starting that first section, which is all around audit, and we'll talk about that on the next podcast. Now, you may already have technical audits in place. Our team will be doing lots of sort of technical audits, but you can, in terms of where you're at with your own classrooms and your own device provision, you can start kind of doing all of that. As we move through the kind of the spring term, again, some of this is our work, but some of this needs to be done at school level. You'll be completing those audit reviews and really thinking about the next section, which is what are we going to do about refresh in terms of classrooms, teacher kit, student devices, and starting to sort of plan that out. Now, maybe in this financial year, this academic year, that you're not actually procuring or buying things. Some schools will be, because their kit's about to die, and they literally, their classrooms are becoming dysfunctional. So for those schools that are in those positions, they need to be moving fast. They need to be doing all that auditing and planning and procuring. Other schools which might say, well, we've already got laptops which are only a year old, and may not be actually buying something just yet, but certainly need to be planning what that is for the future. Not just what it is, but how you're going to sort of make that financially kind of sustainable. So that needs to be the focus of the spring term. And then to summarize the summer term, really, it's all about, well, certainly sort of finishing that strategic planning kind of exercise. So the bare minimum, I would think, as we finish this academic year, even if you're not actually going to do anything, procure anything, change any staff, I think the bare minimum needs to be that you do have that digital strategy plan on that template kind of written down, so that you know where you're going for the next evolution. So I won't go through all of those kind of things line by line, Gemma, but we will share the slides. But that hopefully gives a bit of a summary for leaders. Parallel to that, by the way, there is a piece of this is really for United Learning schools, but we have a technical side of our department, led by my co-director, and using our schools condition allowance. We were very keen on, in parallel to all of that educational work, identifying schools which have major infrastructure needs. Maybe their network is poor or aging, or their wireless is not up to scratch, all of those kind of things, and providing establishing a sound technical minimum standard across all of our schools. So that will be happening in parallel. Not much for schools to do on that, really, other than to be aware that it's kind of going on. And so that will be going on during this year as well. So, by the time we get to the start of the next academic year, really the expectation is that, no United Learning School should be in a position where they can't deliver the educational outcomes of a digital strategy because they've got poor infrastructure. So, we'll be dealing with that in parallel.
Oh. Well, thank you, Bruce. I do hope that everyone that watches this finds it really useful, and I should say now that do look out for future episodes, which we're going to intend to run live. So answer questions from the audience, and these are going to be on the following dates. We will make sure we publish these as well, but our next session is going to be on the 22nd of November at 12 o'clock, where Bruce and Dan are going to be talking about auditing the current state. So it's going to be section B of our toolkit if you happen to look at it beforehand. Then on the 30th of November, again at 12 o'clock, Dan and myself are going to be looking at section C, which is all about that classroom and device refresh. Then finally, on the 6th of December at 1 o'clock, Bruce and Dan are going to be looking at section D, which is all about that financial planning. Now, each of these sessions are going to be around 30 minutes long, and there's going to be someone who's going to be leading the content, answering any questions that you have, and then the host asking questions as well. And once these have been recorded and have gone live, the content is going to go both onto the hub if you're one of our UL schools, and the EdTech Demo Resources website if you're not. So hopefully you'll find those useful. Thank you again to Bruce and to everyone who's now watching this session back, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you, Gemma. Thank you, everyone. I hope you find that useful.